All right, hi everybody. We'll make a start because we're 5 after the hour now. So welcome to our first electives webinar for the Medic to Medic electives. Um, I'm just going to run through a short introduction and then we'll be handing over to our students that have been this year. Um, as always, maybe expect a few technological hiccups along the way. I'm just trying to sort out a few things in the background. We'll just do a few introductions and a little bit of housekeeping to start with, and then we'll get going. So this webinar is being recorded, so we're finding it difficult to accommodate 3 different time zones at a minimum. So we've got our speakers in New Zealand, and I know we've got a few UK attendees who will be coming, and then our Malawian stakeholders as well. So we were expecting a few more people to catch up after the event, which is why it's being recorded. But if you want to ask any questions at any time, you can obviously do that as well. I'm just going to start from the beginning and reshare the presentation. Yeah, and there we go. Okay, so just a little bit of housekeeping to start with. So yeah, as I mentioned, the event is being recorded and we'll be uploading it to our YouTube channel afterwards so that anyone who's not able to attend can catch up after the live event. We'll just ask, I think everyone is on mute already and has your cameras off, but just to avoid distracting from the presenters, if you're able to keep yourself on mute and just turn your camera off as well, that would be very much appreciated. We've got a bit of a mixture of audience. We've got, as I mentioned, we've got our stakeholders in Malawi, and then we've also got some of our student community and alumni community that'll be joining us. We're hoping to have some prospective elective students coming as well, and we've invited some university faculties internationally so that they can advertise the electives to their students as well. So there'll be a little bit of a mixture of us and a little bit of a maybe some diverse questions going on. But basically, yeah, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions after each presentation, and probably just to make it easy, if you can just put them in the chat box, and then what I'll do is I will read them out to the speaker, and we'll just do as many as we've got time for. Yeah, as I mentioned, expect a few technological bumps along the way, but hopefully not too many, and we'll see how we go. So our schedule, all the times shown are in New Zealand time. So you've got a little bit of me talking just regarding the introduction to the Medic to Medic electives. And then we've got all of our past elective students from the last 12 months doing either a live presentation or there's a pre-recorded presentation for Sophie. And then we've got a poster presentation from Deanna as well. So if we're having any technological mishaps, we might amend some of those times. If some of our speakers finish a bit early, we might just change the order a little bit. So timings are dynamic and may change. So very much in keeping with Malawi time and being flexible as always to give everyone an authentic experience. So just a bit of an introduction. So I'm Tamsin, I'm the CEO of Medic to Medic, and I have been running the elective program for the last 12 months. So I want to say a personal thank you and an organisational thank you to all of the students that have come on an elective with us this year. We've learned something from every single one of you, and it's been really great to have you guys as sort of pioneers. You've all been really flexible. Yeah, as I mentioned, we've learned something from each of you, which is hopefully going to make the experience even better for the students coming after you as well. So just for those of you that might not know about us, I'll just give a short summary of who we are at Medic to Medic, and then introduce our electives in a bit more detail. So Medic to Medic is an international NGO. We've got charitable status in the UK, New Zealand, and Malawi, and we provide scholarships to disadvantaged students training as health workers in low resource settings. And our main aim is to increase the number of health professionals in countries where there are critical shortages and increase a vital component of health systems through increasing human resources for health. So our main projects are in Malawi, where at any one time we support between 80 and 100 students in training. And as of this year, we've got a network of over 220 graduates. So we're growing all the time, which is really good. And our scholarships provide tuition fees, semester allowances, medical equipment packs, medical books, and a laptop. And we support a whole range of medical and allied health professionals as well. We've got a few smaller kind of pilot programs in other countries. So we've got a smaller community in Zambia and also a smaller community in Uganda as well. So hopefully over the next few years we'll continue to grow and our community will get bigger as well. So our electives sort of came about because our community was growing and we've got a lot of graduates in Malawi now and kind of the right networks to put in a safe and responsive elective program. So it started with our first student at the end of 2023. So it's been going now for the last 12 months. And as I say, we've learned something from each of the students that have been out with us. And we've got partnerships with, excuse me, 5 hospitals in Malawi. So 3 CHAM hospitals, which are the missionary hospitals, 1 rural, 1 urban, and then 1 on Lake Malawi and Likoma Island. We've got a partnership with a private hospital and then 1 government central hospital as well. So we can really give a good mixture of experiences depending on what you want to get out of your time on an elective and how what your interests are and what your travel plans are as well. So we're currently in talks to partner with a district hospital, which would basically make a complete set in terms of sort of what healthcare settings are available in Malawi. We provide pre-departure support, so we've got Chichewa language lessons, which are done by our students, and give them an extra opportunity to earn an additional stipend, but also give them an opportunity to develop teaching and leadership skills. And those tutorials are done on Zoom. And our graduates also do tropical medicine tutorials, which are again done over Zoom and again provide opportunities for them to develop teaching and leadership skills over Zoom. And much better to learn about tropical medicine before you go from the people on the ground, rather than from people who don't work in that setting every day. And then once you're in Malawi, we've got on the ground support. So we've got a group of alumni that are trained up to be mentors, and they will support you on the ground with local knowledge. If you've got any problems or any concerns, they're also there to support you in that capacity as well. And then we provide sort of the advice on medical items and equipment to take with you. So most flights to Malawi will give you 2 23-kilo bags. So we use that as an opportunity just to provide some extra capacity building and support, and just really in regards to logistics and getting things shipped over. So we, as an organisation, often need help shipping medical textbooks because they're very costly and very heavy to send. So if there's no medical equipment that the hospital needs, then we'll ask you to take some medical textbooks for us. We also do part of your elective fee goes towards a carbon offset sustainability project. So we're working with 2 groups, one in the north, just outside of Mzuzu, and then a community group on Mount Sochi in Blantyre for tree planting initiatives. And then you're also strongly encouraged and supported to undertake a project during your elective. And that can be one where you might need to do some fundraising before you go, or there are plenty of other projects that don't require any fundraising, and you can do them on the ground. And so our hope for every elective student that comes out to Malawi, our aim is to provide 1 student in Malawi with a scholarship. So just by you coming out on an elective with Medic to Medic, you're really helping us do some sustainable fundraising and really helping our community grow. So basically, the more elective students we have, the more students in Malawi that we can sponsor. So just a quick summary of how many students we've had this year. So we've had 9 final year students from the University of Auckland, and the duration of the electives ranged from 4 weeks to 10 weeks, with an average of 6 weeks that the majority of students spent in Malawi. We had 4 students split their electives into 2 locations, and that's perfectly possible to do. But when we do that, we just need we add on a small transfer charge, just so that we can transport you to that next location safely. So just looking at kind of the most popular locations so far this year, or kind of the most common locations that students have gone. St John's Hospital in Mzuzu, which is a CHAM hospital, 4 students have gone there, followed by or followed jointly by Likoma Island at St Peter's Hospital, and then Maiwatu Hospital in Blantyre, and then Zomba Central, and then Trinity Hospital, which is more rural. So you'll hear a bit more from me a little bit later, but I'll just introduce our first speaker. Hopefully, this is an opportunity for all of our speakers today to share their experiences with you, and you can hear a bit more about what their experiences were like. So I'm going to hand over to Ben and Romy now, who should be on in the background. Um, so yeah, over to you, Ben and Romy.
Thanks,
Cool.
Tamsin.
Thank you. I'll just try share my screen and see if that works. Um, I'm not sure if I can, Tamsin.
You know what, you should let me just double check the settings, but
I can share it. It's all right.
okay. Is it
Oh, yeah.
working? Yeah, okay.
Yay. Okay. Then we'll just do the clicking. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Romy, and this is Ben. And we went to Malawi very recently. We only got back a few weeks ago. Yeah, so we'll be talking a bit about our time in Malawi and how great it was. Do you want to go to the next one? Oh yeah, so who are we? Ben is a final year medical student at the University of Auckland, and I'm a final year non-medical student, so I did law and global studies. But I just really wanted to come along with him because I thought going to Malawi just sounded really awesome, and being able to help out medic to medic in a sort of non-medical elective way while I was there just sounded like a really cool opportunity. Do you want to go to the next one? Oh yeah, so we're gonna talk about where we were. The Ben's gonna talk about the different hospital experiences that are available in Malawi and the sort of variety that's there. And then he'll also talk about the cool things that we got up to beyond the hospital in Malawi. And then I'll explain a bit about our period poverty project and then some potential ideas for projects for future students to do on Likoma where we were. And then a little conclusion.
Yeah, all right. So I'll kick off with showing us, I guess, where we were in Malawi, because I don't know how familiar you all are with Malawi. I certainly wasn't before I went. But so I started off in Blantyre in the one private hospital that Medic to Medic was affiliated with. So that's down the bottom there, that bottom arrow. And while we were there, we stayed at the Medic to Medic house, which is a little house owned by Medic to Medic. It's in a really nice neighborhood, and yeah, there's a picture of the bedroom there, so it's really well set up. There's mosquito nets and a fan. Um, and Tamsin was there with us the whole time, which doesn't always happen. But yeah, just I think it's good to know she was incredibly helpful to have around. Yeah, and so then after that 6 week, oh, I guess down there in the southern region, there's quite a lot to do as well. So it's really cool spending some time there. There's Mount Melange, there's lots of wildlife parks. And tea estates too down there. Yeah, so then after our 6 weeks, we travelled up to Mzuzu, all the way up in the north, and then caught a ferry up to Likoma Island. Sorry if you can hear the dogs. And yeah, so then Likoma we spent 4 weeks on, and there's a picture on the top there of our hut that we stayed in. So we stayed at the backpackers on the island, which was really, really nice. It was right on the beach, so lots and lots of swimming and lots of snorkeling. Yeah, and Lacoma's quite small. It's got a population of I think about 14,000. Um, So it's quite a tight little community, and it was really cool to be a part of that for a while, get properly integrated into it. And so, just to give a bit of kind of information, I guess, about the differences between the private and public hospitals in Malawi, because I got to see both sides. Well, public, I was in a CHAM hospital, which isn't completely public, but it's much closer to the public hospitals than the private ones are. And so my plan was to go private first, so that I had time with the clinicians and the doctors to learn about tropical diseases before I was kind of thrown in the deep end. Um, and in some ways that was a good plan, and in some ways it wasn't. I think it's definitely worth thinking about before you go. So my experience in the private hospital was that there was definitely lots and lots of supervision, heaps of time for teaching and discussion with the doctors, which was really cool. And there was also lots of clinics, all the different sorts you would expect in New Zealand or UK, I imagine. Um, yeah, and I could just go to whichever clinics I wanted to, which was awesome. And the doctors were all incredibly helpful, and we had lots of good discussions in the clinics. Another good bonus of private hospitals is that more English is spoken. Um, yeah, which makes it a lot easier, not needing a translator all the time. The doctors all speak English throughout Malawi, but its patients often don't. But having said that, the private hospital is clearly a private institution, and it's like yeah, the patients are all quite wealthy, and it kind of gives an unrealistic view of what healthcare is like in Malawi. And actually, in my time there, I didn't see any tropical diseases. It was all just kind of the same stuff I would see back home, like hypertension and things like that. It's also quite quiet, so not a lot going on because I think most Malawians can't afford to go to the private hospital. So yeah, pros and cons. It was a really good experience, and I'm glad I went. But it's not exactly what I was expecting. So I thought I'd give you some information. Um, Public hospitals, on the other hand, is that's good because it is like a realistic view of what healthcare is like for most Malawians. Lots of advanced pathology and communicable diseases, tropical diseases. That's all going on. I guess what you would expect in Africa. Um, and also the busy ones are in need of help. So it's good to be there and just provide a bit of manpower. Um, on the negative side, they can be very busy um, and are often overloaded, particularly the more central hospitals. So I expect you to have quite a full-on time if you go to a big hospital, but that's pros and cons. Also, because of the busyness, supervision will be much less than in like a private hospital or a quiet public hospital. And English is less widely spoken because patients are generally a bit less educated, less well off. And yeah, just a couple of pictures of the private versus the public ward there. You see they're quite different. And then also within public hospitals, there's a huge range of sizes, and also CHAM versus not CHAM. I kind of lumped it all together. Um, yeah, because I didn't actually go to any public hospitals. I spent a couple of days in one, but I wasn't in one for any long amount of time. Um, but yeah, it's worth thinking about the size as well if you do want to go public, which I would recommend. Um, the bigger hospitals are where there is lots going on, and it's busy and you don't have much time, but there are also lots of doctors around, which is good. Whereas smaller hospitals, like on Likoma, there can be not a lot happening. And the smaller, more regional hospitals also tend to be run by clinical officers rather than doctors. So at St. Peter's Hospital, there's no doctors at all. It's entirely run by clinical officers who have done a 3-year degree. So they're incredibly knowledgeable and skilled, but they aren't doctors. So it's kind of a different language they speak almost. Um, but there's lots of time. And so again, yeah, there was time for learning and discussion with the clinical officers, which was cool. But yeah, possible for there not to be a lot happening. So there's a range of different options available, different hospital types and sizes. And so I think it's definitely worth having a good think about what type of experience you want to have before you go, because you can very much tailor it to what you want. And then whichever type of hospital or hospitals you choose, I think I know Auckland Uni. definitely hammers into us that with your clinical placements, you always get out what you put in. In Malawi, it's like that, but like times 10, like yeah, it would be easy to put nothing in and get nothing out. So you have to kind of go into it with your front foot forward and get your face out there and make sure you get involved in stuff. And yeah, the more you put in, the more you'll get out. And so why is Malawi a good place to go for an elective or in general, a bit of both? So I think one of the main things that drew me to it was that it's like so low income. It's an incredible contrast to New Zealand. It's very, very different to what I was used to. So it's cool to see that difference and just how like a large proportion of the world lives. Also, tropical diseases, lots of really cool, really interesting diseases to learn about and to see, which is great. And English is an official language, which makes it really easy. Like I kind of alluded to before, though, it's only so English is taught in schools and in secondary schools and university. It's like the teaching is done in English. So people who are well educated speak English, but lots of the general public don't. So yeah, it is an official language, but not everybody speaks it. But yeah, all the doctors do, which is great. So even like wherever you are, there's going to be people who can speak English to translate for you, which makes it easy. Another big draw for Malawi, I thought, was Lake Malawi. It is Africa, so it's very hot and can be very dry. And so Romy and I found it great to have a lake to swim in, cool off. And also, lots of fun activities in the lake, snorkeling and kayaking, all sorts to do, diving. And Malawi is also known as the warm heart of Africa, which you've probably heard. And very much for a reason. The people are very nice, and it's a good, safe country, from my experience, to visit. And also as a bonus, medic to medic, make the whole thing really easy. I felt incredibly well supported the whole time, and it was all well organized, which was great. And yeah, just to kind of sonify that is a collection of pictures of things we did and saw, and yeah, you can see like obviously animals. It's Africa. Um, there was some good tramping that we did, and enjoying the lake, kayaking, and just on the beach. And in that top left picture there is of Romy, obviously, and then Victor, who was my motorbike driver in Likoma. So he would take me to the hospital and back every day. And so obviously seeing each other every day, we got a good relationship going, and he took me to see his family. So I met his mum and his sister and his niece, and they gave me some mangoes, which was cool. And on the last day, we went on a big tour around the island to see kind of the last little touristy bits that we hadn't seen yet. And we went all the way up to the northern tip where there's a rock called the Ringing Rock, where if you bang on the rock, it kind of rings like a bell, which was it was interesting. It's quite cool. But then on the way back down, we went to the museum, and Victor came into the museum with us to have a look around. And in the museum there, you can see hanging on the wall was a picture of the Ringing Rock that we'd just seen. And so there's Victor and Romy enjoying that picture of the rock. But yeah, so there's our pictures of Malawi. And I'll pass over to Romy because outside of the hospital, other than this touristy stuff, there's also projects to do. So even if you're in a quiet hospital, you can definitely keep busy with other stuff outside the hospital, which Romy will talk about now.
Yeah, so we were encouraged to do a project, and we would definitely highly recommend that to any elective students going to Malawi, because it was one of the highlights of our time there, both of us. So our main project that we did was a period poverty project on Likoma, and this followed on from Deanna, who did a similar thing a few months earlier in the year. And so here are just a few pictures of us, and then I'll go on to like explain how it worked. For yeah, you can go to the next slide. Cool. So basically, for anyone who is thinking about going on an elective, a project like this to us just felt so easy because we were so well supported by Medic to Medic, but specifically Tamsin. So we fundraised on Give a Little, and we end up fundraising $4,000, which was really cool. And that also felt surprisingly easy, just from pretty much mainly from just people we knew. And then money just like totaled up really quickly, which was so great. Yeah, so we did that before we left, and then Tamsin organized for, oh, before I go on, just to explain a little bit. So the idea is just that on Likoma and in lots of places in Malawi, for women and girls, period poverty is a real issue because lack of money means that it's hard to have period products. So lots of girls, this might mean that they don't go to school or they have a hard time in school because of having to manage their period without anything to help. Yeah, so this is an idea of creating packs for girls with reusable pads in them so that that's no longer a problem for that particular girl. Yeah, so we fundraised the money, and then Tamsin organized for reusable fabric pads to be made at a tailor in Blantyre, so in the country. And then once Ben arrived, he and Tamsin made up 200 packs, so for 200 girls, in drawstring bags, and each pack contained 5 pads, 3 pairs of underwear, laundry soap, body soap, a little cloth, and a Ziploc bag. So they packaged all those up, and then they were couriered to Likoma. Next one. Thank you. And so we arrived kind of around the same time that the packs arrived as well, so that was really good. And so on Likoma with the distribution, we had lots of help from Conjira Banda, who was the hospital administrator at St. Peter's Hospital. She also helped out Deanna earlier in the year, and she's just really enthusiastic to repeat this project in the future if students want to. So basically, she organized with 3 schools for us to visit them and give a talk at each one and hand out the packs to sort of cover one full year group at each school. So we did all Form 1s at Chipyalis Community Day Secondary School, all Form 1s at Bishop Biggers Secondary School, and all Standard 8s at St. Peter's Primary School. So the girls ranged from around 12 to 14 years of age. And we ended up distributing 177 packs. So there were a few that were in remainder that Conjura has at the hospital to either give out or for the next student to give out along with theirs. And then at each school as well, together the 3 of us gave a talk on women's health. And I think Deanna's poster, which will be shown a bit later, has some more details about that. But that it was kind of wide ranging from periods and puberty to STIs and hand washing and some other things. Yeah, so we gave this talk, and then we gave a pack to each girl. And basically this was just a really, really cool thing to do. Each school was so welcoming to us and so appreciative, like both the girls and the teachers and the principal at each school. And everyone was just like, thank you so much for coming. Like, we would love this. Please come again in the future if you can. So yeah, it was just a really great project to be involved in. And then here are a few pictures of us handing them out and the girls looking through them as well. Cool. So yeah, just in terms of for elective students going to Likoma in the future, there is so much scope for future projects to do that, as our experience was, aren't too hard at all and like are so well appreciated by people there. So the first one to say would be more repeats of the period poverty project. There is such a huge demand on Likoma. Like there are at least, I don't know, several more, but a few more high schools that we didn't even go to, or a couple more at least, who I'm sure would really appreciate this kind of project. And then even at the schools that we did go to, we only did 1 year group at each one. And, next year there'll be another year group coming through of that age, and there are all the year groups above that we didn't do. So yeah, huge demand for the period poverty project, and that would just be, yeah, a really great one to do. Another one that I would really endorse for the next students to do, and again, it would be quite easy, would be providing mosquito nets to this particular boarding school that I visited. So it's called Likoma Secondary School, and it's on the northern tip of the island. And I went there one day just to talk to the headmaster about whether mosquito nets for the boarders would be something that they'd be interested in and would be helpful. And basically, the headmaster was so enthusiastic for this, because malaria is a really ongoing, consistent problem for the students. And he told me that around 2 students a day is like very normal, to have to be taken to the hospital on the back of a motorbike because they're so sick, likely with malaria. And while I was there visiting, one student had already gone, and we went and visited the sick bay, and there was another student that was very sick and had to be taken to the hospital. So yeah, I got a really visceral sense of how much this intervention would be really needed and appreciated there. And then another idea would be, while we were there as well, we helped sort of deliver a one-off donation that Tamsin had received, of sort of baby bags for new mothers that had some supplies for them, like baby clothes and other things. And the hospital were very keen as well for that again in the future to give out to new mothers, possibly also as an incentive to deliver at the hospital, or as an incentive to do their recommended antenatal visits as well. Yeah, so basically on Likoma, so much scope for projects, and you're very well supported by medic to medic to do them. Like, it's not intimidating at all. Yeah, and we would just really recommend that to anyone going. Cool. And so now for a little conclusion about our time. So in terms of challenges we faced with our elective there, basically there were none, and it went all so smoothly. And this was because there was such great support from medic to medic. Tamsin was always there on WhatsApp. We were very lucky to be there in person with her in the first half, but the second half she was always there on WhatsApp. And definitely the mentors at the locations where we were, not Likoma, but we had a mentor each in Blantyre and then one in Mzuzu to help us on our way getting to Likoma. And so these were medic to medic graduates. And so I think we had 3 total, and they were all just like so friendly, so responsive, and so helpful. So yeah, the whole time we just had lots and lots of support, which meant everything went very smoothly. And yeah, also we were very well prepared pre-departure through the tropical medicine lectures, both of us through the Chichewa lessons on Zoom. That was just so great to get a little introduction to like culture and language, which I feel like was so valuable for our time there. To be able to just say to someone, "How are you?" in Chichewa just made them quite happy, and yeah, which was really cool. To have that basic knowledge. And then yeah, just the communication as well with medic to medic before we departed was really great. I mean, that we felt that we were very well prepared and knew what we were up for. Cool. Yeah, and then just to reiterate the highlights. So we both had a really great time. The main highlights were for both of us seeing and getting to know just a completely different place and culture that neither of us had really encountered before. Yeah, like that was just incredible. Both of us, a big highlight was definitely the period project, and also going into a couple of schools with Tamsin and Blantyre to teach CPR as well. That was also a highlight, just the kind of those experiences that you wouldn't get as a tourist going somewhere, and also felt like you were contributing a little something to people. Just so cool. Um, and also just, yeah, an amazing place in terms of wildlife. We really, really enjoyed living by the lake at Mango Drift. It was, yeah, just a little oasis of paradise there. Really, really cool. And then, yeah, other things like Mount Mulanji that you can do. Um, yeah, that's all really. Any questions from anybody? Cool.
Awesome. Well done, guys. I haven't seen any questions come up, but if they do, I will come back to you on that. But yeah, well done. I've been so impressed with all of you who have done projects that have required fundraising, because I know how hard fundraising is, and you guys just seem to get it in really, really quickly and easily. So I was like, I've already made a mental note of where your strengths are for the future. So so well done. You did really, really well. And I know the guys, yeah, on Likoma have given great feedback of the project. So you obviously worked really hard and made those community connections, which is always good for students coming after you as well. So yeah, really well done for all of that. Um, awesome. So I'm hoping Bosco and Kevin are here, I think. So yeah, Bosco and Kevin, it's over to you guys now. So if you're happy to put your video on and share your presentation, I'll hand over. I'll hand over to you. We're just asking everyone to, if they've got any questions, to write it in the chat box, and then I'll read them out at the end. Now, hopefully, you should be able to, yeah, share the screen, which looks like you are. So yeah, whenever you guys are ready.
Cool. Thank you, Tamsin. Let me see if I could do it in presenter mode. Nope, that doesn't help. Can you see the presenter notes?
No, you can't. It looks good to me. Yeah, you're good to go.
That works. Right. Good morning, everyone, or good evening if you're in Malawi. My name is Bosco, and together with my colleague Kevin, we went on a clinical placements to Mzuzu last year in November, and we are here to share stories of our 4 weeks there. So we learned about this promo done by the Medic to Medic University group, and we basically got instantly interested in doing a placement in a country that ultimately is very different to New Zealand. So to get more information, we contacted Tamsin, and one of the locations that she suggested was the region of Mzuzu in Malawi. She also told us at the beginning that we would be piloting the site, which to our understanding is that no student has been there before. So it was a little bit nerve-wracking at first. So like any normal person, we basically instantly said yes. And then we Googled where Mzuzu is. And turns out it is a town around 5 hours of driving distance out of Lilongwe, where the airport in Malawi is located. And next thing you know, we hopped on a plane from Auckland and traveled 40 hours there. And the first thing we've done when we arrived was to meet with the local guides, Dr. Petros and Gift, who were absolutely amazing people that guided us through the entire journey. So, for example, right after this photo was taken, they found us a dinner spot, they sorted out our accommodation, and arranged a mobile so we can stay in contact with everyone and with everyone. Then the next day, we've met Dr. Isaac, who is the lead at St. John's Hospital in his office, who basically organized everything on the wards for us. So we've done a lot of things clinically at St. John's, but because we only have 15 minutes, today we'll be focusing probably a little bit more on the teaching side of things, which I think was quite unique to our experience because of how kind of regular and how many lectorials we've given there. But just as a brief overview, when we were at St. John's Hospital, Dr. Isaac would arrange different things for us. So we were attached to different clinics, surgeries, procedures. And my one brief summary is that everything there was fundamentally different from our practice in New Zealand. And especially when we were on the ground doing all the practical work, you can really, really see the differences. And at the same time, a little bit of similarities with how we approach very common problems. During our 4 weeks there, we also initiated a clinical audit to see how the hospital was adhering to the local asthma guidelines. And the plan is for us to use that information and guide the medications that future students, like Fraser, hopefully would be speaking soon, will bring over. And my understanding is that the project is still currently ongoing, and we are quite excited to see how it would go. On the first week in Mzuzu, we also did a school visit to a primary school where we talked to some very enthusiastic kids about what a medical student does, basically. And hopefully, in that 2-hour interaction, we would have encouraged a few of them to join us in the future. Now, this is the focus of today's talk, which is because we spent a significant amount of time at the universities to give some lectorials. So, for example, in this photo, we gave 2-hour-long lectorials to a class of optometry students, and one is on the basic anatomy and physiology of the neuro-ophthalmic system, and another on the genitourinary system, which is shown in this photo here. And I think we must have done a pretty good job because we were asked to do another lectorial on some renal conditions, this time to a group of biomedical science students. And this really was quite a unique experience because of the way that we really do have to tease out and consider what kind of practices were common in a Malawian setting. And this really did pose some challenges into how we can cater the content to different group of students with potentially different learning objectives. For example, the optometry students would have a very different learning outcome to the biomedical science students. And so learning how to tweak the lectorial content was quite a little bit of a good experience. And specifically, I remember before this photo was taken, we did a lectorial on the renal conditions, and we had to go through quite a few edits with Dr. Petrels, who himself was a clinician at the hospital, and he was tell us what kind of treatment option, let's say for treating an AKI, would be commonly available to the students and staff there. So it really was a good way to combine knowledge that we have with kind of the local guidelines and local practice. So now I will hand over to Kevin to talk a little bit about the teaching that we have done at St. John's, which is right across the hospital that we worked at.
Good morning, everyone, and good evening to those of you in Mzuzu. So my name is Kevin, and as you can see, I went on the same trip as Bosco. So we also did some regular teaching at St. John's Institute of Health, which is just across the hospital. And I hope what little we taught was useful to the students, but more importantly, I think we're still very grateful for some of the invaluable lessons that they have actually taught us. So on the photo there is the group that we have worked with. Those are our lovely future clinical officers, which to my understanding are a type of medical professional that receives very condensed training as a medical doctor, but they get sent out to the more rural areas where there's less resources. And so you can imagine that their work is very intense and definitely different to what you would expect of a medical officer in New Zealand, which are the house officers. And we have a very chill. We have all the resources we can have, basically, to just at the tip of our fingertips, unlike those clinical officers who have to rely on some of the clinical judgments. So and you can see here they've definitely got a very intense schedule. Sorry, next slide, please, Bosco. Thank you. So they actually start at 7:30 and all the way until 5. This is very unlike our schedule here in New Zealand where we start at 10 and finished at 12. So we've got a regular teaching schedule here around about 3 to 4 hours per week. And we cover some of the clinical examinations of the 4 major body systems, some basic diagnostic techniques such as X-rays and blood counts, and just some pathologies, for example, heart failure that you can see here. And it was definitely a bit of a challenge with the amount of scope that we had to cover. But I think it ultimately worked out fine, given that we went as a pair and split the work between the two of us. And just the next slide, just looking at the this is the classroom that we had taught in. You can see it was actually the photo doesn't quite tell give it enough just. So you can see it's actually quite a big classroom. There's quite a lot behind the photo that's not being shown. We would have a sort of a handheld projector on the side that we had to mount on one of the poor students' desk, and just prepare some PowerPoint slides. And you know, looking back, it's just full of nostalgia. For those of you in Mzuzu, if anyone could tell me, you know, how you guys managed to mount those chairs up to the very top, I'd be very interested to know because it's still even today, it's still one of the great mysteries that I never quite solved. It's like building the pyramids. Anyways, moving on, Bosco, next slide. One thing that I find quite interesting is that this teaching has taught us things that you know, the thing is that it's quite scary sometimes where you don't know what you don't know until it's a bit too late. And that's especially true for medicine. Um, and it wasn't until that we ended up having to see some patients that where we discovered some of the weaknesses in our field of knowledge. So when I first felt a large spleen on a patient in Malawi, I was so certain that I must have felt the liver, just on the wrong side of the body. And after reviewing their blood results, I was quite puzzled and simply didn't know what to make of it because none of it made sense to me. So you see, for example, when preparing for that full blood count lecture, we commonly refer to this textbook called Tally O'Connor, which is the gold standard for history taking and examination in Australasia. Bosco uses it religiously, almost like his second Bible. So as you can imagine, when we went to the differentials for splenomegaly, you can see here on the common section, it's leukemia, myelofibrosis, and more leukemia. Whereas in the rare, it's malaria. But you know, it's really important for us to take things into context, where common things are common, but where you are also matters. So, you know, in Malawi, malaria would basically be where basically every single palpable spleen in Malawi is informally malaria. And some of the other things that was quite interesting to us is that a skin tone also matters. You know, we've just been so used to looking at hands on people of I suppose finer skin tones, but if for people who have pigmented skin, palmar erythema looks totally different. And you can see here, all of the textbook images we have been given are those of finer skin tone. And just moving on, we also ended up having a bit of fun. And I don't know how I managed, but I managed to get a guitar. Bosco managed to get his clarinet through the border, and we actually caught the attention of one of the charge nurses there. That's the lovely gentleman in blue there. And he was very fond of music. He was very passionate about it. I think he wanted quite a few of his kids to be future musicians. Anyways, it's quite a photogenic family. And we ended up bringing some of the music to the ward. It's almost like a makeshift form of music therapy, I suppose. And we're actually doing that in New Zealand as well. And we even went on TV. So I suppose we're still very proud of that moment. I'm not saying you should go to Malawi for bragging rights, but it's definitely something you can do if you want to. But anyways, that's it for us. It was definitely once in a lifetime experience, and we got some great exposure to medical conditions and settings that we otherwise might not experience. And the teaching side of the things were quite unique as well. It definitely does come with its own set of challenges, but I suppose that's all part of the experience, and we'll definitely remember this trip for a very long time. And we still look back on it with fondness and pride, I think. So yeah, Bosco, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that pretty much sums it up. It was a great trip. Really, I think um, Kevin and I share the same sentiment. We still talk to our friends about this trip. It is an absolutely amazing trip and would definitely recommend. So yeah, that is it from us. Hopefully we are right on 10 minutes. Great.
Yeah, you are. You guys have done really well. Thank you for sharing all of your stories. It's really nice to hear everyone's reflections because it just goes to show you all get up to different things depending on what your interests are, and there's definitely a lot. And I loved how you alluded to the fact that actually there's so much to learn from the other side as well as sort of giving back as well. So yeah, a real mixture of experiences, which is awesome. So again, I can't see any questions, but if any come up on the chat, I will definitely let you know. Um, Feel free, you guys, for the ones that have already presented. If you've got things that you need to be getting on with, then do feel free to leave. I would love to have you stay, obviously, but if you've got things to do, then that's absolutely okay. Um, Next on the schedule, we're just going to do a 5 minute kind of toilet break, snack break, for those of us that have been here from the beginning. And while we do that, I'm just going to put up the poster presentation for Deanna, who unfortunately couldn't make it in person today. So she did a great poster presentation. So I'll just share that with you now. Um, so Deanna, also a final year medical student from University of Auckland, she divided her time between Likoma Island. So you've already heard about that from Ben and Romy. And also then was at St. John's in Mzuzu, which is where Kevin and Bosco were. So yeah, she was our first for Likoma, and then yeah, one of our other students for St. John's. So I'll leave that up on the screen. We'll come back in about 5 minutes time, and then we'll move on with the rest of the presentations. So feel free to grab a tea and a snack and have a toilet break, and then we'll reconvene. It'll be at 9:02 New Zealand time. All right, so we'll keep cracking on with the schedule. So we've got Fraser online, which is awesome. So Fraser, you're up next. You should be able to share the screen, or share your screen, I should say. So yeah, over to you.
Cool, thank you, Tamsin. Let me just get this sharing. Cool, just checking, is this in full screen?
Yep, full
Cool,
screen. Yep.
great. Okay, so yeah, thanks, Tamsin. My name's Fraser, and I just wanted to do a presentation sort of on an overview of my experiences in Malawi, which were quite diverse. And I think, this elective had a big impact on me in many different ways. So I'd sort of like to share just some of the things I did and some of the sort of insights I had and the impact that the elective had on me. So I will just have a bit of an introduction about me. And then I want to talk about life in Malawi and just things I noted about life there, which I thought was really cool, really interesting, and how it differed to New Zealand. I want to just speak briefly about the hospitals I was at. I'll talk about a school talk I did with a couple other students, and finally a village visit. So just to introduce myself, again, my name is Fraser. This year I was a trainee intern, which is our final year of medical school. I'm based in the University of Auckland, or was based, I've just finished. And this year I've been in Waitemata, which consists of the North Shore Hospital mainly in Auckland. So I decided to do a 6-week elective with medic to medic this year. I decided to do this solo, which was definitely a good experience. I would say that a lot of people going on these electives would like to do them with someone else, perhaps with a friend, another student. And I think that can definitely enrich the experience, but it's by no means necessary. So if you feel like doing an elective by yourself, and if you feel like you're, quite independent and capable of managing things yourself well, and you feel confident, then doing a solo elective is a great experience. I personally enjoyed it. I also made plenty of friends along the way in Malawi. And so I never really felt like I was alone. So in terms of the hospitals, I did 3 weeks at Waiwatu Hospital, which is a private hospital in Blantyre. And then I did 3 weeks at St. John's Hospital in Mzuzu. And I just want to say that all the photos I have in the presentation, I have obtained consent for as much as possible by the people. So I just wanted to speak a bit about life in Malawi because this quite stood out quite a bit to me. That photo, sorry, is generic. It didn't actually get a Malawi specific photo for this slide, but so these things sort of stood out to me in comparison to New Zealand in many respects. And I think I took home a sort of newfound appreciation of the culture in Malawi and the way they do things and the way they behave. So I just sort of put a few keywords here to emphasize things that I noted. So the people in Malawi are very welcoming. That's sort of the first thing you'll notice as soon as you arrive at the airport. They're very helpful, very respectful. Everyone makes sure to greet you appropriately and to ask you how you're doing. People there are very hardworking and resourceful, and obviously, I think that ties in with the poverty that they face in Malawi, where they have to make do with what they have, which is in many respects very little. But I actually really appreciated how resourceful people were there. And there's things we take for granted in New Zealand, such as simply just, vacuuming the house, and like you don't have a vacuum cleaner necessarily in Malawi, and so you have to do things manually, and things just take more time. But I kind of just had a new respect for the way that they do things. At the same time, there's a lot of gratitude in Malawi, and I think that in part relates back to the sort of widespread Christian beliefs in Malawi. And so they're very, people there were very grateful for what they have. And I just, really appreciated that. And I kind of wish we saw more of that in New Zealand, to be honest. So just a bit more about the hospitals. I spent 3 weeks in Waiwatu Hospital, which is a private hospital in Blantyre, which I believe is the financial capital of Malawi. This hospital received a lot of affluent patients, and most of these patients seem to have insurance. So it may not be a true representation of the rest of the population in Malawi, but nonetheless, it was still very different from what I am used to in New Zealand, and I learned a lot from that experience. So the hospital itself is well staffed by doctors. Because it's private, there's relatively short waiting times, especially in the emergency department, which I was based. Even actually a lot shorter than the waiting times we have in the EDs in New Zealand, which was nice to see. But again, I think the patients did mostly have insurance there, which isn't, I guess, accessible to most people in Malawi. And the hospital was quite well equipped. It had a CT scanner, which was quite significant. In comparison to St. John's, so St. John's Hospital, I spent 3 weeks there as well. This was a smaller hospital in the north of Malawi in a city called Mzuzu. It was funded in part by what's called CHAM, or the Christian Healthcare Association of Malawi, and also patients would self-fund their appointments. So in general, the patients there were poorer, and the hospital was in a more rural setting. There were fewer doctors. I think there were only 3 doctors at the time I was there, and it was mostly run by clinical officers. And the hospital, sort of relative to Waiwatu, I would say was less equipped. The X-ray machine at the time wasn't working. They didn't have a CT scan, and so they had to refer to the bigger public hospital in Mzuzu. And the only blood test they had available was the full blood count. In terms of the wards, there was a pediatric ward, a male ward, and a female ward, from what I remember, as well as a private ward. I actually became ill when I was at St. John's and had to be hospitalized in the private ward, which was quite an experience, but I felt like I was very well looked after. So, I think it's the way people in Malawi do things with what they have available that really stood out to me. And they also had an in-house pharmacy at St. John's. So it was quite a different experience working at St. John's compared to Waiwatu. I ended up doing a school talk, which was a really cool experience. This was in Zomba. So I did this along with another German medical student who was there at the time, as well as Pauline, who was a medical student from Malawi. And so the 3 of us went to this high school in Zomba, and we were asked to deliver a first aid talk, as well as just a general sort of career and motivational talk to the students. We weren't entirely sure what to expect. It was, not something that we were completely prepared for as well, to say the least. When we arrived, there ended up being about 400, possibly 600 students in the hall who were listening to the talk, which, made us feel very nervous, but we had a blast, and we actually had really good engagement. So we sort of walked through Doctor's ABC with the students, just giving them kind of like a structured approach to first aid, trying to keep it fairly simple and accessible, and I guess memorable as well. And the students actually really caught on to this quite well, and they were able to repeat back to us exactly what to do in first aid situations using this Doctor's ABC mnemonic. So that was really nice to see. We also just spoke about careers in general, specifically health careers, which is obviously what we're involved in, and kind of just educated them on the different type of health careers available. You know, it's not all doctors, there's also nurses, there's also physiotherapists, occupational therapists, dentists, and so on and so forth. And the feedback we got from the students was really nice. We had a Q&A at the end of the talk with a lot of students coming up to us and asking us a bunch of questions. Many of them were keen on surgery, which was quite interesting because I didn't think I actually sold surgery very highly to them, as I'm not interested in that. But, you know, the feedback was awesome. And yeah, it was just really good to see. So here's just a couple more pictures from the school talk. On the left, you can see we're up on the stage. We had 2 models that we were performing and demonstrating CPR on. It was a bit of a stretch with only the 2 models, but that's what we had available. And we were still able to get students to come up onto the stage and give the whole Doctor's ABC structure a go. And they actually performed really well. And on the right, you can just see, obviously, the students who were listening very attentively. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about, this was a village visit I did again with the German medical student who I met there in Malawi. So we visited a very remote village called Indala. This is located near the border of Mozambique. It was quite hard to get there, to say the least. So we had to take dirt bikes along a very, very muddy road. And we did arrive in Malawi during the wet season, so it was particularly rainy and muddy at the time. So it was quite a wild experience getting there. But we got there safely, and it was, you know, also quite fun. We felt like we were on a real adventure. So a bit about the village, just a bit of background that I think is important is, unfortunately, the village was devastated by Cyclone Freddy in early 2023. They've been receiving support from the United Nations, I believe, and I believe China, if I remember correctly. And so many of the people who are living in the village were currently living in tents as they were, you know, trying to save up to rebuild many of the houses which were destroyed. Unfortunately, a lot of the people there died as a result of the cyclone as well. And so this was fresh in the minds of the people living in the village. We had the opportunity to have an overnight stay in the village, and the people there were extremely hospitable. So some of the things that we got involved in included cooking. So we were able to cook nsima, masamba, which is the Chichewa word for vegetables, and madzila, which is the Chichewa word for eggs, I believe. This was a real cool experience to sort of get an idea of how to cook authentically in Malawi, using fires, which is something that obviously I'm not used to. And I also had the opportunity to partake in a village game of Bawo, which is, and I'll show you a picture of it in a minute, but it's essentially a board game using marbles. So I got to play that with the locals for about an hour, and that was really fun. I didn't exactly know how to play. I didn't really understand the rules because there were some, I guess, language barriers, and they weren't able to teach me exactly. But you know, I had someone over my shoulder who was telling me how to play the game and kind of directed me along the way. So it ended up being real fun. Also got to taste sugarcane, which for me was a new experience. And just in general, receiving some education from the people about the impact that the cyclone had on them, which was obviously very significant. And I think in this picture on the right, you can actually see one of the tents that a family was living in because their house was destroyed. So this this picture here just shows the boulders which destroyed their village, unfortunately, during the cyclone, and what the village elders told me was that during the cyclone, basically these boulders were swept down by the flood waters down Mount Mulunji, which is very close to their village. And that came down, so these boulders came down the river with the flood waters, and that just destroyed the village. And essentially you can see the remnants, like the boulders are still there, obviously. And that's just, I guess, a memorandum to what happened. This was the family who hosted me and the other medical student while we were there. So they were very polite. They taught us a lot in terms of cooking. They're very hospitable. And, you know, wish I could still stay in contact with them, but not entirely sure I have their contact details. But they were very nice. And the person in the back here, who you can see waving his hand, he was sort of interpreting for us, which was very helpful. And just on the right is a picture of Mount Mulunji. So this is me playing Barwo on the left. And again, really cool experience, was getting a lot of help on the way. In the middle, that's us cooking. I believe we might have been cooking nsima, or it might have been rice, I can't remember. But we ended up cooking both. And on the right, it's just some sugar cane, which we tried, which was really cool. So, you know, there's a lot more events and a lot more things that I could have talked about. You know, for example, I also did some teaching when I was at St. John's, which was really awesome. But I just tried to, you know, keep this fairly brief and just talk about a few of the experiences to highlight some of the cool things that I got to do and the impact this had on me. I do think the elective I had was extremely impactful. It was very varied. And honestly, I don't think I'll ever get to do something like that again. And just what really stood out to me was the resilience of the people in Malawi. Obviously, there's a lot of hardship there in terms of poverty and natural disasters, especially with Cyclone Freddy and continued risk of flooding. But the people there are very resilient. You know, they get on with their lives and they make the best of what they've got, and they're very grateful with what they have. So I took that lesson back home with me. And, you know, I just can say to everyone to really consider doing an elective with Medic to Medic. I haven't been asked to sell this at all, but I just genuinely think like that elective I had was pretty life-changing. And so if anyone out there is considering an elective in year 6, then definitely consider doing an elective in Malawi. I don't regret it at all. I had a really good experience and I learned a lot. And you know, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now, or obviously you can just message me at some point. You can get my contact details from Tamsin. So yeah, happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Fraser. I haven't seen anyone put any questions in the chat box. But if any come at a later time, I'll definitely send them your way. Thank you for selling us. You've all been such a good group of students. I think you missed the beginning bit, where I was just saying thank you to you all for coming, because we definitely learned a lot from each of you. And I remember with you being in Malawi, you were literally there by yourself. There weren't any other students there. I wasn't there. And yeah, I was always really impressed because you were always keen to get more involved. And so you were literally the guinea pig for us trialing the village visit, which was really successful. And so we've repeated that with other students. So yeah, you're definitely one of the pioneers for all of the school talks and the village visit with Nandala. So yeah, thank you to you as well for being game and being willing to try new experiences. And I think going back to what Ben and Romy said, like you definitely get out of your elective what you put in, and you definitely like were very open to new experiences and making the effort. So yeah, well done to you as well. I think all of these talks demonstrate that all of you have got involved in different ways and done different things, which has been really awesome. But that's fantastic. Yeah, it doesn't look like any questions have come through. So we'll move on to Richard now, who I think is also online. Um, so yeah, Richard, over to you. Hopefully you should be able to share the screen, yeah, without any issues.
Yes, hopefully. How do I do that? I'm a little rubbish at technology.
Okay, so on the bottom bar there you should see a share screen share button.
Yep.
But
There we
you
go.
just need to make sure your presentation is open before you press share, and then you select which window you want to share.
Okay, so hold on.
Yeah, all good. Plenty of time. We're a bit ahead of schedule, so we're not running to Malawi time. We're doing well.
Fantastic. There we go. No, I start there. How is that looking to you guys? Is that sharing or is that?
Yeah, that looks great. We can see it. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So hello everyone. My name's Richard. I'm a New Zealander, and I had the privilege of going to Malawi in sort of Q3 of the year, so around about July, August. And I thought I would use my talk today as a chance to expand on a field of medicine that I discovered while I was in Malawi that I think might have changed my life in a small way, whilst also going through my experiences on elective. Through a conversation with some of the other medical students while I was over there, I learned about this field called Planetary Health. And I'll talk more about what that is. But I thought I'd just sort of use this as a chance to share my excitement about it. So talk today, I'm going to start by fully explaining what the field actually is, so you've got a sense of it and you know what I'm talking about. And then running through my locations that I visited on elective. So like Fraser, I also visited Ndala and did a school talk there. And then I spent 5 weeks at Trinity Hospital, which was a sort of a smaller rural hospital, what we might call a secondary centre, down in Nsanje region. And then I spent 5 weeks at Zomba Central Hospital. So I'll talk about what I saw there as well. And then maybe wrap up with some of my sort of takeaway thoughts from the whole experience. So first of all, planetary health is a newly emerging field. The sort of starting gun for the field as a whole was this Lancet Rockefeller Foundation paper in 2015, although there were sort of already there are other people working towards this before then. But the description given in that landmark paper was the health of human civilizations and the state of the natural systems on which it depends. When trying to explain it to people, I sort of compare it more to public health, just to have a sort of a landmark that people are already a little familiar with. So I'd say it's a bit like public health, except it extends beyond the borders of a single country, and also obviously beyond health systems, but still with a very strong health focus. And it's also interdisciplinary. So you would also get working in in planetary health. You'd also get people like commerce people and engineers and politicos and lawyers and that sort of thing. So to give them more concrete examples, because I never really understand anything until I have like a proper, an actual concrete example, I thought an interesting one given by the Planetary Health Alliance in their sort of intro lecture to planetary health was this issue of nutritional depletion in food with increasing carbon dioxide. So the way this experiment works is they sort of had some carbon dioxide sprayers set up in a field of common crops, and they found that when these crops grew, there was less zinc, protein, and iron in the actual plants, which down the line is going to equate to people getting less of these nutrients in their food. And for each of these nutrients, over 100 million people are predicted by the models of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to become newly deficient over the next century. And the highest risk regions for this new onset of nutrient depletion are going to be South Asia and Africa. So working in places like Malawi, we need to start thinking about how we're going to deal with the health problems resulting from this. This could look like some advocacy for reducing carbon dioxide emissions, although that's a big job and lots of people are already working on it. But it likely will also look like, for people in our field, working out ways of distributing zinc, protein, and iron supplementation amongst the Malawian population. So the way I think the way I like this example because it demonstrates that it would be normally this sort of thing might be outside the scope of normal public health because the upstream drivers are outside the health system and across international borders. And it's also outside the scope of normal like climate science because as you know, there's a very strong health focus. It's probably not someone who is more focused on sea level rise or disaster prevention and adaptation would look at. It's a health problem that doctors in hospitals will need practical solutions for at the end of the day. And just want to reiterate that not everything's about climate change. There are all sorts of ways that humans are disturbing the ecosphere. It is climate change and it is everything change, as the Planetary Health Alliance say, although a lot of it is climate change. So my elective with Medic to Medic was, I sort of touched on 3 main locations. So like Fraser mentioned earlier, I got to visit Ndala Village for an overnight stay and then a day trip back later in the elective. And then I spent 5 weeks at Trinity Hospital, as I mentioned, which is also a CHAM hospital run by the Roman Catholic Church. I think the Sisters of Divine Mercy are the main stakeholders there. And this was a sort of a low altitude, relatively hot weed town with lots of problems with malaria, access to clean water, and limited access to healthcare. And then I got to spend 5 weeks in Zonda Central Hospital, which was more of a big tertiary center with more complex cases in the internal medicine department, and generally more physical access to healthcare, water, food, everything really. So to start off with my time in Ndala Village, I got to do a school talk there and also a stay with the people in the village. This is shortly after I arrived, so my jet lag memory might be a little bit foggy with this one. But the purpose of the visit was to promote health professions to the students in the school there, and therefore improve access to healthcare. And I think following Hurricane Freddie, I think access to healthcare and a lot of other things has become a major problem for the village. It was also a good chance for me and another elective student to learn a little bit about village life in Malawi, because that's how the vast majority of people in Malawi actually live. They don't live in the larger towns and big cities. But I think from a planetary health perspective, seeing the effects of Hurricane Freddie was pretty impactful, made an impression on me, because you can learn about this sort of thing intellectually, but it does affect you a little more profoundly when you see the actual scale of the destruction of the town, as well as hear about the loss of life and the injuries to all the people there. And there's still ongoing health problems with reduced access to water, food, healthcare, education, shelter. Like Fraser mentioned, the access road going to the town is still being repaired and likely will be for a wee while. I'd also just like to mention, because I've got a psychiatric interest myself, I think possibly down the line there's probably work to be done on the psychological impact of extreme weather events like Freddie. I definitely noticed, people were feeling down from what I heard in conversations, and I suspect some people were relying on alcohol as a sort of a coping mechanism, and that's going to have all of the usual health effects that has. So moving on to my second location, Trinity Hospital, as I mentioned, was in a sort of a larger trading centre, more connected along a big road in Sandia region. And I got to do a few things while I was there. So I did a lot of work in the hospital. I got to move between 4 of the hospital's 6 wards. So there was some adult medicine, pediatric medicine, obstetric and gynecological, and 1 week with the outreach team driving around the nearby villages and providing clinics and vaccinations, and got to sit in on a mother's support and training course, which is pretty inspiring. They like to liven things up and make it more acceptable by having sort of starting every session with a song, which is really nice. Something we could possibly, I don't know, adopt. I also got to do a needs assessment audit for the hospital since I was the first student there, and usually with Medic to Medic we like to do stuff to help the hospital that hosts us to give back. But since I was the first student, we needed to work out what help the hospital actually needed. And I also got some time to go and do some lecturing over in the nursing college. So I'll just drill in deeper to the needs assessment because I thought that was pretty interesting and did touch on some planetary health issues. So what the actual audit looked like was me going around the staff members and running through a list of questions which Tamsin and maybe some of the Medic team had prepared for me to deliver. So it was assessing, first of all, the resources that the hospital actually has in terms of number of wards, equipment that was present or missing, frequency of power cuts, that sort of thing, as well as common health problems, which is more conversations with the clinical technicians and doctors, just to hear sort of what sort of problems the hospital was trying or struggling to fix. And then in my report back to Medic, I got to suggest potential projects for Medic to do in the future with future exchangees. So the long and short of it is many resources were lacking. And the most common issues that they were dealing with were malaria, obstetric emergencies, some food insecurity, and some waterborne infection as maybe slightly more upstream drivers of illness. I also, again, noticed that there was quite a lot of alcohol and substance abuse. And this was having direct effects on people's bodies, but it was also leading to more physical injuries when people are sort of intoxicated and wandering onto the roads with no street lights. I also thought that some work could be done on malaria prevention because one of the colleagues there mentioned that people, even when they get malaria nets, often don't know how to use them properly or choose to use them for gathering food or protecting their gardens. And fair enough, like people need to eat at the end of the day, and maybe they recognize correctly that they need to secure a food source ahead of malaria prevention. But it still means that, I don't know, we could be doing some sort of work there to protect them from malaria as well. I don't think it needs to be one or the other. So from a planetary health perspective, I guess I want to sort of think more broadly. Could these problems be linked to human activity? And to work that question out, we'd need some sort of evidence. So this could look like an audit to link agricultural practice, deforestation, and extreme weather events to the incidence and prevalence of these health problems that we are seeing. So this would look like, for example, going off my theory that alcohol intake might increase following droughts or flooding. Taking a sort of a questionnaire for patients that come in to visit the GP clinic, asking them about alcohol intake, and then comparing that to the weather records. I don't know exactly. Details need to be ironed out. I was also very interested in the question of how Malawian hospitals operate while consuming less. So I think, it's a little frustrating to always think about Malawian healthcare framed as a deficit. I think they do a lot of things very well. I think we've already talked about the ingenuity of people in Malawi figuring out workarounds when they don't have access to all of the luxuries that we have. So I thought it could be interesting to look at what the use of things in the hospital are and what the effective substitutions are. The main example that sticks in my head is when I was in the operating theatre on my obstetrics week. I noticed that a lot of equipment that we would probably have a single-use version of, they tended to reuse. Of course, it's important to make sure that this is balanced against patient safety and finances. So, you'd also need to check for post-operative infection rates and things like that. But if things like surgical drapes, for example, can be effectively sterilized after surgery, then maybe that's something we could look into in our own health systems. And this is a significant problem. Just to give you a solid fact, it's about 4 to 5% of the carbon footprint of the entire United Kingdom is due to the provision of healthcare. And this includes things like running the actual hospitals, as well as the supply chains of all these disposable pieces of medical equipment that people just churn through and chuck out, and possibly don't even need to use at all in some cases. And it may be that here in New Zealand, we've got similar proportion of carbon footprint due to healthcare provision. So finally, I went to Zomba Central Hospital, and I got to work in the internal medicine department, so I wasn't rotating around so much. And while I was in Zomba, I also got to see firsthand the rapid deforestation of Zomba Plateau, so I thought I would touch on that briefly. So yeah, as I mentioned, I got to do internal medicine in Zomba, and this was split between infectious and non-infectious wards. And I saw more complex cases, more rare diseases. So my time in Trinity was dominated by malaria. There's still plenty of malaria in Zomba, but I also got to see more complex, like AIDS-related illness or leprosy or severe pneumonias, that sort of thing. And I also fell in with a group of other medical students and ended up doing more adventures outside the hospital. So I've included a picture of a mouse that I got to eat from one of those roadside mouse vendors, which is probably the most adventurous thing I've done in Malawi, or at all even. touching on planetary health, again, I'd be interested to see if the health issues there that I saw are driven by environmental degradation, locally as well as globally. And again, what sort of solutions could we learn from Malawi? So I just touch on the deforestation on Zomba Plateau because it was pretty shocking to see. I heard from local friends that we walked through the plateau with that sort of recently within living memory, the top photo that you see there, that hill on the plateau was covered in woods and now is sort of becoming quite bare. And you can see two people walking across the dam there carrying a load of wood, as you'll see sort of on Zomba Plateau or at Malanje as well. And they do it because they need to. I think, yeah, it'd be emphasized that it's wrong to put the blame on them. They need to eat. So they need that wood to create charcoal to burn on their fires. Down the bottom there, that photo is me and one of my colleagues trying to heat up a curry on the residual heat left in the oven after the power cut halfway through cooking. So it's yeah, we all know it's a real problem. There's also driving this sort of deforestation of things like slash and burn agriculture, where forest is converted rapidly and unsustainably into farmland to provide more food. And then you also get non-intentional fires sort of spreading from rubbish fires, as well as intentional fires, which is anecdotally heard from a taxi driver that if people are squatting on land and get ordered to leave, then they'll set fires as they get pushed off by the police. I have no idea whether that's true or not. This is purely anecdote. But the consequences are basically increased vulnerability to extreme weather events. So you've got increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, making these events more likely to happen. But then the ability of the local land to soak up and dissipate the water is reduced, and you get local flooding becoming more likely. You also get change to the landscape with desertification in some areas, or I didn't see much of that in Malawi at all, but it's something that could happen as temperatures increase and rainfall changes. And also you get loss of any food that the forest was providing, as well as the loss of the sustainable fuel source. So after it's all been cut down and converted into charcoal, there's no more charcoal. So there's a clear need to do a little bit of work reforesting as the forests are harvested. So as far as solutions to this, Medic to Medic already has a sustainable forestry project going. So I think full marks for that. And there would also be some need to see what the hospital's capacity is for dealing with the more predictable impacts of deforestation. So are they going to be able to cope with these unmitigated extreme weather events causing injuries? And are they going to be able to cope with the worsening nutritional deficiency in the population? So a big take-home message that I wanted to mention just before I finish is this idea of climate justice. So basically, high-income countries are actually responsible for these big planetary scale changes that we're seeing. Malawi is not responsible for these big changes. So comparing the carbon dioxide emissions, you can see Malawi and nearly all of sub-Saharan Africa are basically some of the, well, in terms of emissions, basically some of the cleanest countries in the world. And it's generally places like North America, Europe, and Australasia that are producing more of, causing more of the problem. But meanwhile, it is sort of, this whole pattern is inverted when you look at which places are more exposed to extreme weather events and other effects of climate change. We do get hurricanes in New Zealand, but they're not as bad, and we have the finances to cope with them, whereas Malawi's been pretty battered. It's interesting to note on that map on the right that they weren't actually able to give Malawi a vulnerability index score because of lack of data being gathered. So just emphasizes the need to gather good data as part of the argument for planetary health measures. So given this, my suggestion is to focus on adaptation strategies in Malawi and look more at prevention in New Zealand and the UK. And I think this is something that Medic to Medic may be able to play a role in. I mean, Medic to Medic already is doing quite a lot to help Malawi locally adapt. So, as I mentioned, looking at things that locally worsen the effects of these extreme weather events, etc. Sustainable forestry, and looking at sort of relatively local drivers of worsened malaria rates. Things like agricultural practice and fertilizer runoff into waterways can have pretty significant effects on malaria rates. Probably outside the scope of Medic to Medic, but interesting to note. And also preparing the health system to respond. So training more healthcare workers, promoting healthcare as a career route to students in rural schools, and gathering more planetary health data and supplying critical resources to hospital, resources that actually need targeted towards fixing these problems. And then I think my other suggestion is, in terms of prevention, training Medic to Medic alumni once they go back to New Zealand or the UK or wherever to be better advocates for planetary health. So this is partially gathering planetary health data can play a role in this. It helps us to be more equipped with hard facts that we can use to advocate and make our arguments, as well as educating alumni on the impacts of medical systems. So that looks like learning a little bit about the carbon emissions and waste created by our own medical systems, and comparing that to how little an impact hospitals in Malawi tend to have out of necessity. And I'd just like to thank Medic to Medic for making this wonderful experience possible for me. It's really, it's something that'll stick with me forever, I think. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome, Richard. Thanks so much for sharing all of those thoughts. I can see, yeah, you're really passionate about that, which is great. We need more people who are passionate about climate change and, yeah, planetary health. There is actually a New Zealand group. I'll maybe send you the link. That's just started on trying to like make healthcare more environmentally friendly. So yeah, when you were talking there, I was thinking, oh, you'd be a good advocate as a first year doctor as well going in. So I'll share that with you as well. But yeah, that was great to gain your insights. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I can't see any questions in the comments, but if any come through again, I'll let you know and I'll come back to you. But yeah, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing all of those things. Great. Okay, so we've got one pre-recorded talk coming up, which is from Sophie. Now Sophie was our very first elective student. So she literally was the pioneer. I think things will have got a little bit better. Not that they were bad, but again, we just we've learnt things all the time, and Sophie is our first one. Probably was the experiment student. But so hopefully you can see the screen there. I will hit play and hopefully you'll hear it too.
Hello, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are whilst you are attending this forum. My name is Sophie Hamilton, and I would firstly just like to begin by apologising that I am unable to make it in real time today. I was about to say in person, but obviously everyone is attending this virtually. But apologies that this is all pre-recorded, but I am currently away overseas at the moment, making the time zones a little bit trickier for me to be able to attend. but I still wanted the opportunity to be able to talk about my medical elective, given I have really fond memories about my elective in general, as well as the beautiful country of Malawi. And so any opportunity to encourage or talk about this amazing country, I will definitely take that up. I completed my medical elective in Malawi at the end of 2023. This was also the same year I graduated with my MB-CHB. I have also just completed my Bachelor of Medical Science Honours and am about to commence work in Rotorua in New Zealand in 2025. Just to put a face to the name, this is me down here with one of the lovely supervising doctors on my medical elective. I thought I would just briefly touch on where I was based for my medical elective. So I spent 6 weeks at Mzuzu Hospital. I personally chose to be based in the city of Blantyre, as given I was travelling solo, I just felt the option of being in the city suited me better, as it just made me feel more comfortable. I still had ample opportunity to meet other student doctors from both Malawi and other countries as well, but it was certainly a matter of taking every opportunity that came my way and establishing connections whenever I had the chance. At Mzuzu Hospital, I split my time between obstetrics and gynecology and emergency medicine. So the main topic I wanted to speak about is cervical cancer. Given part of my elective was based in obstetrics and gynecology, this was something that I came across fairly regularly. As the name suggests, this disease is cancer of the cervix. Human papillomavirus, otherwise also known as HPV, is the most important etiological factor, with most tumours containing HPV DNA. This virus is sexually transmitted, with HPV 16 and 18 being the most common high-risk types. The progression from latent HPV infection to cervical cancer typically takes about 15 years. The viral oncoproteins E6 and E7 disrupt cell cycle control, leading to abnormal cell growth and progression from cervical intraepithelial neoplasia to invasive cancer, with additional undefined cofactors contributing to this process. Cervical cancer is obviously a devastating disease to be diagnosed with. As mentioned previously, it is an HPV-related malignancy preventable by vaccination and screening. Patients are commonly asymptomatic at presentation, which has obvious implications for being able to detect this devastating cancer at its early stages. Patients with advanced disease may present with symptoms such as abnormal vaginal bleeding, postcoital bleeding, vaginal discharge, pelvic or back pain, dyspareunia, or obstructive uropathy. Treatment is tailored based on severity of presentation. For micro-invasive disease, treatment with cone biopsy or a simple hysterectomy is recommended, and for early stage invasive disease, surgery is recommended. Globally, cervical cancer is the 4th most common cancer in women, with around 660,000 new cases in 2022. In the same year, about 94% of the 350,000 deaths caused by cervical cancer occurred in low and middle income countries. The highest rates of cervical cancer incidence and mortality are in sub-Saharan Africa, Central America, and Southeast Asia. Regional differences in the cervical cancer burden are related to inequalities in access to vaccination, screening, and treatment services. Zooming in more on the population of Malawi, it is known to have one of the highest rates of cervical cancer in the world and the highest mortality. Further to this, it has been recognised that women with HIV, also known as human immunodeficiency, present a higher risk to developing cervical cancer compared to the general population. Women living with HIV are 6 times more likely to develop cervical cancer compared to the general population, and an estimated 5% of all cervical cancer cases are attributable to HIV. Malawi is one of the countries worst affected by the HIV epidemic, with an estimated adult HIV prevalence in 2019 of 8.9% nationwide and 17.7% in Blantyre city itself. As a medical student over in Malawi, the one thing I really enjoyed was engaging in conversation with consultants, talking about these big topics such as cervical cancer and barriers that present with improving these poor health statistics in this country. From my conversations firsthand with consultants, I was under the impression there is a lack of a cervical screening program. We know that cervical screening programs using pap smears are incredibly valuable and have resulted in a reduction of up to 80% in the incidence of cervical cancer in developed countries. These consultants I was speaking with said they often conduct pap smears opportunistically. However, through further research of my own, I discovered Malawi has made multiple efforts to expand cervical cancer screening and early treatment since the 1980s, with challenges in resources and infrastructure leading to program relaunches, including a 1999 pilot project aimed at fostering policy and service level engagement. This paper depicted here on the screen investigated barriers for women to accessing cervical cancer screening and early treatment services in Malawi. Major barriers identified included gross shortage of staff, lack of equipment and supplies, the lack of supportive supervision, and the use of male service providers. It was also noted that there was a lack of awareness about the disease among community members, long distances to health facilities, and prevailing misconceptions about the disease. For example, there was a misconception that it was caused by the exposure to the VIA process, which is the visual inspection with acetic acid and iodine, which just affected the uptake of these services. So it's clear that there are some barriers to implementing an effective screening program here. One thing that I noticed at Mawatu Hospital was the lack of educational resources available to patients when visiting. So one of the things I did before I left was I made a couple of posters, one about cervical cancer and the second about schistomiasis. The one about cervical cancer is displayed here on the screen. I will obviously stick to medicine as I don't think designing posters is my forte. But I thought having this level of information accessible to patients was important for improving education about this topic. So key takeaways I want you to go away with is cervical cancer is preventable. High mortality occurs in low and middle income countries, and HIV presents as a major risk factor with many barriers existing which limits an effective cervical screening program in Malawi. Malawi is an incredible place to experience medicine as a medical student. It's an adventure and there is a lot to learn, and that goes both ways, as I think there is much to be taken away from how medicine is practiced in Malawi, as well as the skills and knowledge you may be able to bring as medical students from different parts of the world. The people in Malawi are incredibly friendly and kind, and there is ample adventures awaiting should you choose to take them. My only advice is to get involved and take every opportunity which may present itself if you choose an elective in this beautiful country. These are just a couple of photos of the incredible time that I had and some amazing people that I met along the way. So if there's any, one last piece of advice is just take every opportunity, and just see where it takes you. Thank you for listening, and again, apologies that I was unable to be there in person, but if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. I've left my email there in the bottom left part of the screen. But Tamsin also has my contact details, and I'm very happy for her to share this with you should you have any questions for me. So thank you.
Awesome. So that was from Sophie. Now I've just got a final closing point. So it won't be too much longer. We're almost at the end now. So we've heard from all of our students that we've had this year. So just doing a quick summary of the student projects that have taken place for the elective students that did some additional fundraising. So in total, 5 elective students did additional fundraising for their projects or the location that they were visiting. And so altogether, with those additional fundraising projects, an additional 9,200 New Zealand dollars was raised, all of which was transferred to Malawi and then spent locally again, so investing in local markets and economies. The projects for which we did fundraising for this year included we were able to build one house in Nandala village for one family. The primary school, Nanchidwa in Nandala village, we did a office renovation rebuild for the school teachers. A total of 300 menstrual hygiene kits were distributed on Likoma Island, and also 52 mosquito nets were distributed to St. Peter's Hospital on Likoma Island as well. Already had a bit of a chat about future projects, but some in Mzuzu include working with the One Stop Service, which is the sexual assault service up in the northern region. There's a few sort of specific projects themselves, and then a couple of ongoing things that would be good to get involved in terms of kind of audit projects and things like that. Mother and baby packs, which I think Romy had mentioned in the Likoma location. We're quite keen to get that up and running as well as the mosquito nets at the secondary schools there. There's also potential within Nandala Village again to do some community health surveys and help in renovating their local health centre. So they currently have a building and a structure that was given to them by World Vision, but at the moment they've got no means to stock it or staff it. And actually, with our graduates at Medic to Medic, we've actually potentially got quite a few graduates that wait for employment or wait for internships to start. So potentially we could get volunteers from our student community as long as kind of their expenses were paid. So that's another potential kind of a good impact one, given how hard Nandala Village is to reach. That would be really meaningful for the village and that community, and in terms of provision of healthcare. And hopefully that would mean if that gets up and running as well, that our elective students can go and spend 1 or 2 weeks there, really in the village, and provide kind of really primary healthcare to that community. I think I've got to repeat there on the final one, so that's a typo. I'll just move on. So some of the elective opportunities have already been mentioned, but just really want to emphasize kind of the pre-departure preparation that we give you as well. So with the Chichewa language lessons and the tropical medicine tutorials, like they're not just for you in many ways as a prospective student going, but they're also opportunities for partnerships with our community and helping them develop leadership and teaching skills, which is really beneficial to them as well. Obviously had some talks already alluding to this, but teaching at St. John's and Trinity College. So both of the St. John's and Trinity have a college attached to them where it's possible to get involved in teaching. And we've heard today that can also be a meaningful experience and learning from the students as well. We've always got opportunities and always got things on the go that we personally need help with at Medic to Medic. So that some of that could involve like being involved with student interviews and other kind of events that we have in country. So next year we're hoping to have a Malawi marathon at Setimwa Tea Estate, likely to be quite small to start with, but always need a few hands on deck, and hopefully if that's successful, that might grow in years to come. School talks have already been talked about, but really that is a collaboration with our student community in Malawi and the visiting elective students. So basically to try and motivate and encourage students at secondary school or primary school to continue with education and just to try to improve health literacy and giving a bit more information about the process of going to college, what it involves, yeah, what courses you can study, where you can study them, and then elective students helping with that CPR teaching and basic first aid, just to basically put it into a bit of perspective and context, and hopefully be a bit more motivating for students to continue with school and study the health professions. We've got the Nandala village visit, which has been mentioned a couple of times. We do health checks from time to time with businesses in Malawi. So they're just kind of simple primary health checks like blood pressure checks, pulse checks, BMI, a bit of discussion about alcohol and smoking. But they're definitely things that elective students can get involved in. At times we do have guardian visits, and I think they're really helpful. So essentially, the guardian visits are part of the process of selecting new students at Medic to Medic. So our graduates will visit prospective students, guardians at their homes, kind of do an assessment of the home environment. And so there's potentially opportunities to accompany any alumni on those visits as well. And they can be really helpful because I think it puts into context the role of Medic to Medic in Malawi and the impact of scholarships on the wider family can be really helpful as well. Now, 3 of our elective students this year actually represented us at a graduation, at a college graduation that we were unable to attend. So potentially there's going to be opportunities to visit a Malawian graduation, which is always a really happy and vibrant occasion. We've obviously got those project management opportunities, which we're really trying to encourage. They're not compulsory by any means, but if you're looking to have a career in sort of the international humanitarian context, often when you go for job interviews, you'll be asked about what experience do you have in a low resource setting, and if you've got a project from your elective that you can talk about, then all the better. And there's always projects for us that need sort of auditing or looking at or monitoring and evaluation work. So so that varies throughout the year, but there's definitely things that you can get involved with. So I think you can hear my cat there. He also wants to be involved. Some feedback from the elective location. So as well as us kind of getting feedback from the elective students, we get feedback from the locations as well. So just a couple of quotes here. So one of the hospitals said we had quality time with the student and we expect more students to come. And another said it was eye-opening and interactive, and it should be highly promoted, which is what we're trying to do here with our webinar. Also get feedback from our alumni mentors on the ground as well. So just capturing one of these quotes. So one of our mentors said, it was an amazing experience. I learned a lot and really made me think of myself as someone my country can rely upon. Being able to interact with an international student and making sure their needs are addressed in time and that they are made to feel safe and protective, it's not a simple task. This boosted my initial understanding of myself. For once, I felt so much more important in one's life. And then another one of our mentors said it was a wonderful experience and it helped me to build my organisation skills more. And I'm looking forward to many more elective mentorships. I am just going to let my cat out because he keeps disturbing. All right, sorry about that. Okay, and just wanted to share a little bit more about how the electives have helped us in terms of fundraising. So so in terms of Malawian expenses, so 18 million Malawi kwacha has been spent in Malawi on student expenses on electives. So the vast majority of that goes on accommodation and then in-country transport and the hospital hosting fees, and then medical council registration, and then kind of the other activities that you see in the table there. Again, like some of those things you might think are a little bit unusual, like the t-shirts. So we've only just started them, so actually only Ben and Romy have had the medic to medic t-shirts, but the idea is that you'll all get given a medic to medic t-shirt to travel in, so that when you're picked up at the airport, that the person can recognize you, and just make that transition a little bit easier. The international expenses we've had, so we have had a few setup costs in terms of we've purchased 3 bicycles at different locations so that students have them available, so you can get around and be independent. And that has included sort of getting bicycle safety equipment, which has been transported from New Zealand for our elective students. So there's been a bit of a international outgoing costs, and then we do keep an admin fee as well, which is kept by me to organise all the expenses. And then in terms of kind of just overall, so yeah, the expenses has been about 18 million Malawi kwacha. The total profits from this sort of fundraising initiative has been over 9 million Malawi kwacha. And then on top of that, with the fundraising projects as well, we've added kind of another 9.2 million Malawi kwacha. So again, 37 million Malawi kwacha kind of added to the local economy through this initiative. So again, something which I think we can all feel quite proud of, that we're sort of creating capacity, but also supporting financially and bringing in Forex into the country through this initiative as well, which is what Malawi needs in the longer term. Okay, and then just a summary of the projects that have been done this year. So with our profits from the initiative, so we've managed to clear the balance of one nurse midwife technician at Trinity College. So she had a balance of about 2.5 million. We've also managed to train 28 of our alumni to be medic to medic mentors, and paid for their first 6 months stipend for being a mentor, to provide sort of mentorship to all of our medic to medic community. So that's sort of over 80 students, which is a huge undertaking and hugely beneficial in terms of being able to provide that peer-to-peer support for students in Malawi who are studying and still have challenges. And we're currently undergoing 5 assessments of new students, which we're hoping to kind of take on using the remaining fees from the fundraising that the electives have done as well, which is great. So that will be 6 new students, part of the medic to medic community because of the elective program, and also been able to initiate our mentorship initiative, which is helping over 80 of our students with peer-to-peer mentorship support. Just a little plug, we've got our next set of elective tutorials or tropical medicine tutorials. They start next Sunday on the 8th of December. These are for New Zealand students. That they will be repeated for UK time zones sort of later on in the year. But if any New Zealand students out there want to get involved, and again, you don't have to be going on an elective if you're just interested in getting some extra teaching, then that's then by all means you would be very welcome to come. And again, if you're doing an elective, not in Malawi, but elsewhere in Africa, you'd also be very welcome to come as well. So in sort of the words of our mentors on the ground, and also the faculties on the ground, we're looking forward to many more elective students in the future. So if you are interested, or if you want to sort of have any other questions or have a non-obligation Zoom, then just put elective application into the subject of an email to info@medictomedic.org.uk. And just so we've got a little bit of background before we meet you over Zoom, just let us know your name, your university, if you've got a preset elective dates, and what your preference for hospital location is. But it's absolutely fine if you're not sure. Like we then arrange a Zoom to discuss all of those things, answer any questions, and also find out a bit more about you, so that we can really kind of advise appropriately, so you can make informed decisions about what's going to be most useful for you and your career, and also what experience you're looking to have. So we have got a bit more information on the electives tab of our website where you can download our latest sort of electives leaflet, and we've got a fundraising leaflet and a projects leaflet on there as well. But otherwise, thanks so much for bearing with us at the end of this webinar. We're at time now, which is perfect. So we've just run to time. Thank you so much for checking in. Thanks to all of our students, and thanks to all of our partners in Malawi for hosting all the students and working with us to really create a sustainable and responsive elective experience.